Good morning, everybody. It is 6:30 on Tuesday morning. I woke up this morning and I had several comments about the HP50 versus Neumann NDH 20 comparison that I uploaded yesterday. And people seem to take the video well, and I'm glad that people took it well. But one of the comments that was repeated more than once, I think twice, was that, boy, this video is very long. And the most recent comment that I read this morning was, I don't have that much time to listen to this. Can't you just make a shorter video? You can keep the longer one, just make a shorter one. And I did say several weeks ago that was an option. I'm happy to do that, and so that's what I'm going to do. I think that's a very reasonable request. So I'm going to spend maybe 15 to 20 minutes summarizing what my findings were from yesterday as I remember them. Now, obviously, hindsight is somewhat 20/20, and I will not remember everything that happened yesterday, unfortunately. That's why I say somewhat 20/20. And I certainly do not remember sound, just like everybody else. So this is just a general impression. If you want to hear what my true impressions were at the time, you have to go back and listen to that video. Indeed, one of my subscribers said, I listen to your videos like a podcast. That's essentially how I record them, like a podcast, which is why I don't see any B-roll or anything like that with respect to the actual comparison. There's only so much B-roll you can do, and if you do use B-roll, then you're limiting yourself to how much B-roll time you actually have. And that can be a problem if you are trying to thoroughly review something. Okay, so let's just get to it, right? I was quite surprised. If you couldn't tell, I was really surprised by the HP50s. Why? Well, because I don't know what I really expected from them, but I wasn't thinking that they would beat the Neumanns. And I certainly didn't expect them to beat the Neumanns to such a degree. It was a beat down. It was shameful how poorly the Neumanns performed in comparison to the NAD. When I first purchased the NAD, I found it at $115 on Amazon, brand new. And I went around eBay and other sites trying to look for it. Amazon had it for the cheapest price. There were only two at approximately $115. I bought the first one. A subscriber of mine subsequently bought the second one. So there, as far as I know, there aren't any more of these available at $115 on Amazon. Doesn't mean it won't come back at that price, but certainly at this juncture right now, I don't think there are any. Everywhere else, these headphones were being sold for about $200, and I thought that's too expensive for a pair of headphones like this because it looks plasticky. There's not a whole lot of reviews out there. There are no real reviews out there, let's be honest. And it looks ugly. And, what am I spending money on? Am I really going to waste $200 on another pair of headphones that I know, quote, know is going to sound worse or not any better than the Neumann? God, that's throwing away money. And that was the analysis going through my head. In the meantime, while I was looking for an alternative headphone, I had already purchased the Allo Audio closed-back headphone, which shipped on Monday, yesterday. And I thought, okay, so that's going to come in. That's going to be a true flat representation headphone. Do I really need to get another one? And I finally pulled the trigger. I said, fine, I'm going to do this for $115 Amazon, which means I can get it returned if it turns out it's not a good headphone. So that's what I did. And so my expectation was extremely low. I put these things on during my unboxing just to make sure that they worked, because you should always test if it works the moment you get the product. And I was a little surprised. I thought, wow, that's an open sound. That's a stereo speaker-like sound. That's very nice. Kudos. Let's see how this performs. And yesterday, they performed, the NADs performed magnificently. It's like having a child, a small child that is frail. You have no faith in that child. And one day, that child has to compete in a race. You know that child is going to lose. You show up, you're really embarrassed to be there with all the other family members, with all the other parents, because you know that your sickly little child is gonna lose. And they're going to all point their fingers at you and say, you produced that. And all of a sudden, the child wins. And you're flabbergasted. Everybody else is pretty surprised too. And all of a sudden, you feel a well of pride that you had never sensed for that child before. In fact, you thought that child was shameful. Most children are. And that's how I felt about the NADs. It's like, this is a sickly looking headphone. I mean, this is not, it's not a sick looking headphone. It's not the common day usage of the word sick. Man, that's sick. It's not, dude, that's dope. It's, God, this looks sick. Like, this thing looks like it's anorexic. Somebody needs to get this thing to a hospital. And it performed so damn well. What is so fantastic about this headphone? Well, first of all, the build quality is, on second thought, the build quality is okay. The ear cups are plastic. They get fingerprints very easily. It's shiny black thing. And that's not my sort of thing. That's a very cheap headphone impression. Plenty of headphones on Amazon are $20 with cheap plastic around them. And why NAD thought this was a good idea is beyond me. But they chose to do this. That's fine. The headband is fine. I think the headband is really well thought out. It sits on your head really comfortably. There is no pinching. There's no discomfort. And the ear cup itself is, in fact, attached to the headband with a metal piece. I thought it was plastic, but it's very cold. And so it is, in fact, a metal piece. The only plastic that I can see here is on the ear cup. And then there's two little plastic pieces where the L and R indicators are on the headband itself. And that's it. That's all I can actually find. Versus the Neumanns, which are made of metal. And you could throw them at someone and kill them. But the looks of a product is not as important as how it sounds. And the price of a product is not as important as how it sounds. The Neumanns are just closed. They sound like you're sitting inside of a tank. Maybe that's what it should be. The Neumanns look like modern modern tanks. You know, like tanks that shoot shells at people. You know, World War II tanks. It's like a modern tank. And they make you feel as if you're sitting inside the tank listening to music on speakers. And bad speakers at that. That's how they sound. It sounds tinny, hollow, lacks depth. There's not much soundstage. And it's very unnatural throughout the frequency range. There's nothing I can say about the Neumann that would make me think, or none of the impressions that I've had about the Neumanns would make me say that they present natural tonality. So I'll give you 3 examples. First of all, the bass. What's natural? Natural to me would be, gives you the sense that you are actually there at the concert, listening to this with your own ears. And the only thing that is amplifying the music is the loudspeakers that are set up by audio engineers. And they know exactly what they need to do. That's my impression. That's my thought when I say natural. Okay? You are actually there. So with the Neumanns, the bass, it's not natural because it doesn't give you that impact. It doesn't give you that natural decay to the drum strikes. It sounds muffled repeatedly. I have said this over various songs, that the drum strikes sound as if there is a bed sheet or a bed cover or a cloth or something that is draped over the drum head, and now the drummer has to drum with that hindrance. The type of sound that comes out from it is muffled. It's not natural. That's not what drums really sound like. Whereas compared to the HP50, I told you, if you go back to my portion near the, 2/3 mark on the video, regarding the drum solo by Jack Bruce, and what I heard something I had never heard before on headphones so far with that song, which is the drum strike comes, there's a hard there's a harsh slapping sound that's natural that comes from the drummer hitting the drumstick on top of the drum head. That's the first sound that you hear. And then immediately after that, because of that hard strike, the air inside the drum is pushed down because of that force. And you hear on the HP50 this boing. It's like the bottom dropping out of something. Boing. I mean, it's so natural because I've heard drums in live person, right? I mean, in live person, not dead person. I've heard them live. Most of you, if not all of you, may have done the same. And if you pay attention, you've heard that before. And it's a really unique sound. I don't know of any other instrument that can make that type of sound. Well, the HP50 produced that clearly, whereas the Neumanns could not even produce it. It wasn't like, if I turn up the volume on the Neumanns, I can hear it. No, I couldn't hear it. That sound simply was not reproduced. On the HP50, it was there. It was the detail. That's a big difference, guys. If you're sitting down and you're telling yourself, I need to find a pair of headphones that gives me natural tonality, that's going to be a big deal breaker. If you cannot hear the natural sound of a drum, you shouldn't have any confidence in a headphone, no matter how well it might do in all of the categories. Name me the number of genres available that do not use drums to any effect. It's very few. Especially with modern music. Now, let's go to the midtones. The midtones are quite recessed on the 20s. So somebody had mentioned this when I first unboxed the 20s and I started to listen to them. And they had said, somebody said, another reviewer had said that the midtone sounds, quote, scooped out. And I thought, that's a stupid thing to say. Scooped out. What does that even mean? And I was really disinclined to believe that sort of vague commentary. And then I put on the headphones and I started listening. It turns out it is true that I wouldn't call it scooped out. I would just say that the midtones are missing the emphasis. They are recessed. They are not natural. Because there's part of the reason it's not natural is because there is no soundstage. For a closed back headphone, I would say that they're fine. But for a pair of headphones that's being sold for $500, they're not fine. They're not $500 fine. They're okay. They're a closed back pair of headphones. You do get the same amount of soundstage from a pair of Beats that goes for $350 and get slightly better bass out of it. I mean, overemphasized bass, but still, I would rather have overemphasized bass over no bass, really, that the NDH 20 give you. The soundstage is a big killer here with the 20s. Maybe it was the tuning, maybe it's the way that it's padded on the inside, it's just the way that it was all implemented together, or maybe it was Neumann saying, we don't think that anybody really wants soundstage. Now, I'm not saying that the 20s sound as if you're claustrophobic. It's not the sense I get. But I feel as if there's so much potential left in these headphones. I wonder if there was a way to make the headphone sound wider, if that could have contributed to getting more detail out of it. I mean, it probably wouldn't have saved the bass response, and maybe would have thinned out the midtones. But that would have given Neumann the opportunity to say, okay, now we've made this wider and there are issues here. We have to do something about the bass and the midtones. Bump those up. Make those more in line. This is not a flat headphone. Don't get me wrong here. It's not flat. It's just a weird curve. I don't even know how to describe it. Yes, you can go online. You can find reference graphs for the 20s. But I don't think the reference graphs really explain what these headphones sound like. The other major difference between the 20s and the 50s yesterday concerning the midtones was I could hear multiple vocalists' natural tonality. So the 50s on Haim, Want You Back. I've heard that song, I don't know how many times. And most headphones I've heard that song with, what they do is they take the backup vocalists and they kind of meld their two voices. You know that there's two of them. I know there's two of them. I know that group. I've seen the music video. I understand that there are two. But other headphones, what they do is they meld the backup vocals, and they put it basically center stage. It sounds good, it sounds pleasant, and you kind of get used to it. The NAD 20s do a very similar thing, where they just kind of meld the two vocalists. There's just a slight hint of separation between those two backup vocalists' voices on the 20s, but it's hard to tell. On the HP50, it was immediately different. It wasn't muddied at all. All three of the vocalists, the primary and the two backup, had their own specific vocal frequency. More to the point, the two backup vocalists, one was on the left, one was on the right. I have yet to find another pair of headphones that reproduced their vocals in that manner, meaning accurately. That's how they were supposed to be recorded, left and right. In the 20s, just put them up center, along with the primary vocalist. There was clear separation between those two backup vocalists as they sang. So the 50s, what they did was so surprising to me, is that not only did it put the two vocalists left and right, but it also separated their voices. There was a clear difference between their voices. And on top of that, not only was there a clear difference between their voices, but there was also a clear difference, meaning there was one person singing and there was another person singing. But there was also a clear difference in the tonality and the frequency of their voices and the short delay between them. There is indeed a short delay between those two singers. It's a second, if at that. But they're not exactly in tune with each other. The HP50 present that. Would you call that micro detail, or would you call that part of the recording? I would say it's both. But micro detail is part of the recording. But it's not just something that's left as an Easter egg in the song. No, that is the song. You are listening to it as it happens. That's the impression I get when I heard it on the 50s. And if you go watch the music video for Want You Back, you will kind of get the sense of, wow, that's how the song is supposed to sound. Okay, so they are supposed to be two steps behind the primary vocalist, and they are supposed to be left and right, and they're not exactly in tune. That's what the 50s do. Whereas the Neumanns, they don't even bother. They just kind of lump everything together. It destroys the song, the naturalness of the song, in my opinion. Let's talk about the treble, the higher frequency range. Here's what I'll say about the Neumann. If you are... Good morning, Shay. She's here saying good morning. If you are treble sensitive, and I am, then maybe the Neumanns would be a very good fit for you because they smooth everything out. It's like putting a veneer of butter everywhere. And you're lathered up with butter. It's really slippery, and it's not going to feel too good after a while, but for the moment, you smell good, and you're ready to eat yourself. That's a Seinfeld reference. If you've never seen Seinfeld, there's an episode where Kramer butters himself up, and his best friend gets really hungry, and all right, so it's a little bit of cannibalism, I understand. Back to the 20s. The 20s have this smooth tonality to it, and it cuts off the treble well before it ever becomes peaky. There is at no point does the Neumann become peaky. I have listened to it at low volume, listened to it at middle volume, and I've listened to it all the way max volume before my ears just say, no more, I can't take this loud noise anymore. Nowhere along that scale of volume does the Neumann get peaky. It is astounding how well Neumann was able to limit the harsh frequency, and they should be commended for doing that. It is so difficult to do that with headphones. I have yet to find another pair of headphones that is as smooth as the Neumann. I had thought that the LCD2 closed was the smoothest headphone I had heard, and now with the Neumanns on, I said, no way, the two closed are not smooth anymore. The Neumanns are. And if you are looking for a very smooth presentation of the treble, with no worries that you're going to pop your eardrums at high volume, the Neumanns are your headphones. I don't know of any other headphones that can do what the Neumanns do in that regard. That being said, they're not accurate. You lose a tremendous amount of detail when you knock off a good chunk of that treble frequency. Audiophiles talk about sparkle, that something is sparkly in the treble. It's basically a way of describing how it sounds. It's sparkle. It sounds sparkly. It's the best way we put into words what we're hearing. A more concrete term I would probably use is to say that the higher frequency gets ear piercing and it becomes heavily accentuated at a certain frequency range, certain frequency point. And it changes with every headphone. It may not be the same with every headphone. And the frequency itself doesn't really matter because you and I don't look at frequency charts. We don't look at frequencies as we're listening to music. Only audiophiles pretend that they understand that nonsense, and they don't. But when we say sparkle, we mean there is a bump in that very narrow area of the frequency. And that just kind of emphasizes the ear piercingness. That's how I say it. And that's, I think, a little bit more concrete. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's a lot of energy when you reach that point in a song, and a headphone has a bump in that frequency. That's a lot of energy there. And so whatever detail is in the song gets pushed up. It gets accentuated. It gets pushed forward into your ears. But if a headphone is never going to, but if a headphone is never going to produce that energy, then you're never getting that detail. It's never getting accentuated. That's the problem with the 20s. Excuse me. Early morning. Now compared to the 50. Now the 50s don't get particularly ear piercing. I've heard headphones that are much worse in that regard. But they do get close to sibilant and ear piercing. I would say they're much more natural at it than the 20s. Doesn't mean that the HP50 is the most natural. It's the king of it. That's not what I'm saying. Indeed, I would submit to you that there are better headphones available that provide a much cleaner, more accurate representation of the treble region. I could tell you right now that the Sennheiser HD700 has a better representation with that higher treble area than the HP50. Also, the 1990s will probably have a very good, natural, much more energetic representation of the higher frequency. But if you're talking about closeback, unless you jump up in price significantly, maybe the XC, maybe the XC, yeah. That's the only one that I can think of at the top of my head as a closeback that would provide that type of clear, precise, highly detailed, extra energy treble. There might be other headphones between the HP50 and the XC that do it. I don't know. But the HP50 by no means is like the 20s, where the 20s just knock everything out and say, I'm never going to give you that. The HP50 says, here you go. And it gives it to you. And there's a lot of detail that you can get out of the HP50 in the treble region that is simply missing from the 20s. And one of the ways I would describe it is, let's go to the piano frequency, right? The piano representation on the 20s is atrocious. It is awful. It sounds like you're stuck inside of a shipping container listening to it. It's very unnatural. It sounds hollow. There's no natural decay to the piano. And if there's multiple things going on, if it's just the piano, it sounds bad. But if it's a piano with a cello or a bass instrument of some sort, it gets all distorted and it sounds bad. But the HP50 has a much more natural decay of the piano. It sounds more airy, significantly more airy than the 20s. When there's the cello or other bass instruments playing, it doesn't get muddy. It keeps those frequencies separated. Now, I don't think that the 50s do the best job with songs like A Flight from the City, which is piano-centric, or from the piano guys. It doesn't do the best job. I've heard much better headphones in that regard, but they're open back, right? The HD 800S would do a significantly better job than the HP50. The 1990s, definitely much better job at that. What was the last headphone that we tried? I forget. I even think that the 660S probably has a better representation of piano than the HP50. But those are all open back headphones. And you expect there to be a lot of airiness and width, especially to piano. Whereas with the HP50, it's closed back. And for being closed back and for being as cheap as it is, let's say less than $200 or $250, it does a phenomenal job. Not only does the piano have that great reverberation, it's not the best I've heard, by the way, but it is very good. Not only does it have that reverberation, but it also reproduces that piano frequency in what I would say is a fairly natural presentation. It doesn't get peaky, and it sounds good, but one of the things that really doesn't make me want to say that these are fantastic for piano is that in Flight from the City, when the pianist is hitting down on the keyboard, there's a thump-thump sound. The NAD 20s, not the NAD 20s, the Neumann, they reproduce that thump-thump sound, but the rest of the piano is distorted, so that's kicked out of the consideration. The NADs reproduce the piano frequency very well, but that thump-thump sound is more muted. And that's a detail in the song. Now, that may not matter to you. But for me, if I'm listening to it and I'm trying to be more critical, I would say because it's missing that extra detail, it's not the best at reproducing that song, at the very least. I don't think that the NAD 20s are particularly great in piano-centric songs, but they're not bad. They're better than the 20s. They have more soundstage. It sounds more natural. There's a better decay to the piano. And with multiple instruments playing alongside the piano, it doesn't get muddy, unlike the 20s, which do get muddy. So those are the three huge differences amongst these two headphones. We're reaching the 30-minute mark, so I want to wrap this up. I was surprised. I don't know anything about this room feel technology that NAD claims it has implemented. Maybe it's accurate, maybe it's not, maybe it's all marketing, maybe it's just a slight padding thing inside the ear cup. Who knows? But I don't care. These headphones, the NADs, sound phenomenal compared to the Neumann. That's my impression. Blown away by how different these two headphones are. If you had to choose for monitoring, I would probably pick a much better headphone than either of these two. Let's be honest here. I'm not saying that the NADs are fantastic monitoring headphones. That's not what I said. I'm telling you, in comparison between the NAD and the Neumann, the NAD is a much better, significantly, demonstrably, objectively better headphone than the Neumann. All across the board. It doesn't matter what application you have or you're thinking of using for the Neumann. The NAD beat it. Period. Sound-wise, at least. But neither of these two headphones is really a monitoring class headphone. They're not particularly good at it. The Neumann is not good at monitoring because it's that weird curve. It's just atrocious. And the fact that it cannot reproduce the frequency range in a natural manner. The NAD is not good at it because there is a slight emphasis on the bass. I said that yesterday. And I'm not quite sure that audiophiles or people who are producing and mixing and mastering headphones, not audiophiles necessarily, would be particularly happy with the light clamping force. There's a lot of sound leakage from the NAD. And it's missing some details in the higher frequency range because it doesn't really give you everything. And it doesn't necessarily reproduce piano frequencies naturally. So it has its own issues. But in context, between the two of headphones, the NAD has significantly fewer issues than the Neumann. Which one would I recommend? If you had to choose between the two, right? And this was your budget. You said, I have to make a decision. I either buy the Neumann or I buy the NAD. What do you recommend? If that was the question posed to me, I would say I would probably recommend the NAD for all these reasons I provided you already. The Neumanns are good, smooth, really relaxing pair of headphones to listen to. If you just want to put them on and put your feet up at the end of the day and listen to something without worry of your eardrums blowing, the Neumanns are a good alternative. But they're not the greatest headphones I've ever heard. In fact, they don't, beyond that smooth tonality, they do nothing that is unique. How about that? Beyond that smooth presentation, the Neumanns provide nothing that is unique. Nothing that would make me say, wow, that is why I want to wear these headphones. And if you don't want to have just smooth tonality across the board, if you don't really care about that, then there is no reason to buy the Neumanns, especially at $500. That's the simplest way I could tell you how I feel about the Neumanns at this point. If you are seeking an audiophile grade headphone, and let's be honest, what I mean by audiophile grade, I mean headphones that give you detail, that are natural, and even if there's a slight boost here and there, overall, the picture of the music is fairly accurate. If you want to look for a pair of headphones that have that characteristic, the Neumanns are not it. I would point you towards the NAD before I would point you towards the Neumann. And anybody, and I know we're at 32 minutes, and at anybody who says the opposite, if anybody says the Neumanns are fantastic with detail, the Neumanns are Stax level detail, the Neumanns are the best headphones, sub $1,000, need to get their head checked. They need a CAT scan, and then after they're done with their CAT scan, they need to sit down with me so that I could have a therapy session with them because clearly somebody hurt them. They're people who have issues, and I will talk to them, and I won't comfort them, but I will emphasize how terrible their decisions have been up to that point. Anybody who says that the Neumanns are worth $500, that is a personal opinion. Just like it's my personal opinion that I say it's not worth $500. It's the same thing. But unless those individuals can actually tell you with specifics, doing an A and B test, they cannot just sit there and tell you that these are better than this other headphone. I have yet to find a pair of headphones that the Neumanns really handily beat. I mean, they do better in some regards. They do sound better in some ways, but they don't wow me. They don't make me say the Neumanns are the best headphones under $600, $500. They are worth their price. They do something unique. They don't do anything unique other than smooth everything out. Other than that, everything else is about average. Nothing you can't get from a cheaper pair of headphones. And here we are. Hey, look, we have a cheaper pair of headphones that does better with the vast majority of things that we've listed. That's my impression. Okay, it's 34 minutes. Thank you so much. I hope this was a shorter video. It's 1/3 the time of the actual review. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for subscribing. If you have any questions about these two headphones, let me know. Post it in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer them. Anybody who ordered the HP50 because of my review, I hope that my review does it justice. I hope that you hear what I'm hearing. If you have any questions about that, let me know. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful Tuesday. I'll probably upload another video today. I have some time. Thank you, and thank you to all my subscribers for subscribing and commenting. Have a wonderful day.